Gear up, Scooter fam. Today, I'm going to show you how to calculate estimated range based on the battery voltage and the amp hours only. Hey guys, so today I'm going to get into a video that I thought would be fun. I didn't put out a video yesterday because I was kind of cranking through some things and trying to work through some what I'm working on, what I've been working on now, and I'm gonna show you guys. And so I think it was someone that commented, one of my viewers commented and said, thanks for using stated range in your videos when you're talking about stated range, and that's because stated range can be all over the place. You know, you can see scooter companies, and it tends to be that they want to overstate their range. They have perfect conditions, that they're going 15 miles an hour, flat surface. I mean, you know, as perfect as it can be, with a really light rider and so forth, to get you these numbers and make them look good. But the truth is that no one lives in those types of conditions, and getting that much range is probably not going to be realistic for the average person. And so what I've done is I've taken some data, because that's what I do, 9 to 5, and I've taken some data, and then I've run some statistical analyses on the data, refined it, ran it again, refined it, ran it again, until I feel like I've gotten to a decently accurate statistical prediction model for range based on a few factors, a few variables, with two of the most important simply being the amp hours and the volts, which is the battery size. So you can tell a lot by range simply by looking at the battery size. There's a couple of caveats that go along with this, but I'm going to try to do my best to explain how I got here and how it works, and hopefully you guys can enjoy this. I hope it may not get very many views, very many likes. It may be a bit boring for some of you guys. I apologize, but I'm going to show you how I can take the NAMI Superstellar, which there haven't been any range tests that I'm aware of at this point, and we can estimate what that range is going to be real world based on very few inputs, mainly battery size. And seems like magic, but it's statistical magic. So for the NAMI Superstellar, we have a battery size of 52 volts and amp hours of 25 amp hours. Now you're thinking, how can we be, there's so many other things going on here, how can that be correct? Well, I'll just show you right now. I put in battery amp hours, battery volts, and of course what pops out under range that's calculated is with an expected range of about 30 miles based on that. And so once again, I know it may be confusing to say, how can we look at that? I mean, there's the motor watts. We don't even know what the motor watts are. There's the size of the scooter itself. It could be 120 pounds. It could be 100 pounds. We don't know that. We don't know that. And so how can we possibly estimate range by only knowing the battery amp hours and the battery volts? There's just so many other variables that come into play. So that's what I've been working on for the past 24 hours or so, just trying to get a perfect way to approach this. And I thought about it for a while, and then I did some testing, and then I went back and I thought about it, until I found something I felt was reasonable and was getting decently accurate results. Nothing's perfect. There's going to be some outliers that just miss the mark, but for the most part, it's fairly accurate. And it's certainly a better picture from what I have observed than what you get from the manufacturer's website or retailer website. So in other words, it's much more accurate than what they're claiming. I'll put it that way. And it may be a little off. Like I said, there is a margin of error, but there's several times I've gotten really close with these estimates based on actuals, and that's how you test the accuracy of a statistical model. So once again, we can estimate 30 miles of range based on 52 volts and 25 amp hours. There are a couple of caveats. I have them pushed out of here just because I'm working on a couple of assumptions, just two assumptions. And the assumptions are that we're talking about a dual motor scooter, and we're talking about a rear tire that has air. And I'll explain that. So if we wanted to look at a scooter that had a rear tire, doesn't matter what the front tire is. If we want to look at a scooter with a rear tire that's solid, not an air tire, we have to change an input. And then if we want to look at a single motor scooter, we have to change an input. So right now, the model assumes a dual motor scooter with a rear air tire. And that's it. And with those assumptions made, I only need the battery amp hours and the battery volts to get a decently accurate range estimation for the scooter. All right, let's get into sort of how I did this. And I'll show you, it's going to be hairy, it's going to be ugly and stuff like that, so just know up front. But some of you may be into this. But the point is, I take all these statistics, all these variables, all these things that come into play, and I gather some data. Boom, and here's our data. Here's one of our things, and here's a bunch of stuff that I'm just playing with and estimating and jotting down and so forth. It's not going to make any sense, probably just glancing at it. But this part here is the important part. This is the data that I have. And for motors, I use a 1 or a 2 here based on that. For suspension, I did a 0 and a 1. For rear tire, I did a 0 or a 1, once again, if it's relevant or not. And so I started with just the very basics, and then I worked from here. This is what chiseled down somewhat as well, but as you can see, the weight's not on here. It's already been taken away. But this will just show you kind of what I did. I go through and then I run a model. I run a statistical model on this data, and it basically says, this is what I want to know. These are actual ranges. These are tested ranges, not stated ranges. These are tested ranges, and this is the battery size, which is the battery size here is simply watt hours multiplied. This is watt hours. It's volts multiplied times amp hours. So this would represent 36. I can get the answer by going equals battery size by the battery volts, and it was about a 7.8 amp hour battery. So you could, instead of doing it that way and double counting it in my formula over there, I just put in the amp hours and the volts, which are easy to see on most websites. If you only had watt hours, you could use that. But in any case, what I did was just go ahead and use the battery size in amp hours and volts to make it an easier calculation to do, because that's all that means. So once again, our motors are 1 and 2. I have it 1 and 2 because it doubles. The rear suspension is just like a binary 0 or 1. Either you have it or you don't. The rear tire is either solid or air. Those are the most important factors, I think. And anyway, I ran the data, and then I get some results like this, right? And it gives me some statistical outputs, and I look at the p-values, and any p-value that's too high, I will delete from the data, and then I'll run it again, and then I do it again, and I do it again, and I do it again, and then I go and I do some more, and I do it again, and I do it again, until I find a perfect spot. Until I find a perfect spot where I have a good number, which for me was battery size, volt, rear tire. Yeah, this one, right? So this is the model that I found to be the most accurate, meaning with each time I removed one of the higher p-value variables, the model became more accurate. And as the model became more accurate, then I was able to continue. Once I continue to remove p-values that were high, and it started going back the other direction, and I becoming my model started becoming a little less accurate. Then that was the sweet spot. That was the sweet spot where I liked where that was falling at. So with the data that I have, which is data that was readily available, I threw this into a statistical model. I did some refining until I got to this point where I feel like we're right at the point of the curve that with what we have to work with, we can give the best prediction. So that's this model here. All right, that's what this is. That's coming down. That's chipping away everything until we get to the most important variables in the equation, so that we can put together a formula to give us expected range, which is the independent variable in this particular situation. This is called a multivariable regression analysis, if you're curious, and it looks at multivariant collinearity and takes each thing into consideration and gives you scores based on how significant they are to the prediction model, and it runs these regression tests, bouncing back and forth, trying to fit a line to the data, and then when it gets the least amount of squared errors. I'm not going to go into too much of that. That's a big topic. But when it gets that, it spits out these values, these statistical values and scores, and you continue to refine and add as you need. But like I said, I took everything that I had, and that's how I do it. I put everything in there, whether I think it's necessarily useful or not, and then I chip away at it and take this out and take this out as the scores get better and better and better until I hit a point where they no longer really get better, and I know that's my sweet spot with the data that I have to put my best foot forward for a prediction. This is stuff that this is not what I do currently in my 9-to-5. It's very related to kind of what I do, but it is I have done this in the past in some of my historic in my history, more data science kind of thing. A lot of what I do now is kind of watch trend lines and sort of react to fluctuations as opposed to the cranking outs of predictions and so forth. At the moment, that's what I do. I love my job. I have no not complaining at all, but I've done more in-depth kind of cranking out behind the scenes, this type of stuff before. And so once again, we can estimate our range for the NAMI stellar, superstellar at 25 amp hours and 52 battery volts to be 30 amp hours. Now, once again, as I said, that there's a couple of caveats. I'm assuming it's a dual motor scooter. Now, I said in my last video that it was a single motor, rear motor, and that's because that's what it shows on the here. That's what it shows here. And so you have the superstellar. Sorry, it says this is not a motor. All right, just FYI, that is not a hub motor. We'll go look at we'll take a look at the back wheel in a minute. This is not a hub motor, right? Not a hub motor. You can't fit a motor in here. There's not even a wire running to there. That's a brake. Was a good picture of the back tire. I know there was one. There it is. This is the rear. This is a hub motor. That's a hub motor. Not a hub motor. hub motor. So can't see through there. It's not a big hole. It's not enough space here for there to be a hub motor there. All right. Now, supposedly, and I have heard this, and a viewer corrected me and said that this one was the dual motor version. I'm not sure, because the pictures that they show are not the dual motor version. There is a single motor version, hence the pictures. And so there's a single and a dual motor version, I'm told. I haven't, I don't know for sure which one this is. I'm going to try to get more information from Wired Rides on that, or for someone that knows, and find out for sure. But at the moment, you got two 1,000 watts listed here. So if you paid $16.99 and you went back and said, look, it says this was a dual motor scooter, and they were like, yeah, but the picture, this was a typo. The picture is so I really don't know. Make sure that you ask before you order the scooter, if you do decide to order the scooter, and I'll certainly see what I can find out as well very soon. So I don't know for sure if for $16.99 at this point, if you're getting a dual motor scooter or if you are getting a single motor scooter. That I don't know. And I'll show you how that affects our formula. I've got a couple hidden, like I said, these are the two caveats. And so if the rear tire is a air tire, it's a 1. If it's a solid, it's a 0, and that drops, as you can tell, pretty significantly. And based on my data, I just will talk about that for a second as well, because the one thing that I noticed now in the data, I put both, right? I had both started off with the solid and front tire, the solid rear and front tire. So working through the data, I realized that the front wasn't as statistically significant as the rear. And so it was able to be removed from the data and actually make the statistical model more accurate. And so that's what's being done here. And the rear tire is the one that matters. And like I said, interestingly enough, that's the one that I changed on the Hover One Journey Max and lost so much range. Now, it makes sense. That's where all the weight is. I think that's why the other one kind of got thrown out. It doesn't seem to matter much on the front tire. However, most scooters that have only one tire as a solid tire, maybe all scooters that have only one tire solid and the other air, are going to have the rear tire as a solid tire, because that's where most flats happen. And so since that's the rationale behind why they do it, it also has the most impact on range, because that's where most of the weight is placed. Suspension didn't seem to matter. All the other things, like I said, got tossed out, and the model became more accurate. So I just continued tossing out variables until, like I said, we got to the optimal formula. So if this is a dual motor system, we should get around 30 miles of range. And if we went to a single motor system, a couple more miles. Now, once again, there's a margin of error. It could be 34, 36, 36, 38, something, it's going to be close to maybe 28, 30, but it's probably going to jump about 2 miles based on whether or not it's a dual motor or a single motor in this particular configuration. Now, I was going to go over, earlier I was having a little fun playing around with the two eMove cruisers, right? The V2 and the V2, the dual motor and the single motor. And based on, there has been a range test done on the single motor. However, the single motor is only a 52 volt system. And if you buy the 52 volt system and you have dual motors and you add the motor, you're only going to get so much range, because the battery voltage stays the same. So I'll go into why, and I'll show you in my formula how that works. So we have one here at 52 volts, 30 amp hours, one at 60 volts, 30 amp hours. And so let's go over here to our model. Both of them are 30 amp hours. One's a 52 volt, take that to 1, and the rear tire is an error. We can hide this because I don't have any solid tires that we're going to worry about right this second. We are, going to play around with this a little bit. So with the 52 volt 30 amp hour, which is the original eMove Cruiser V2 single motor, we can get 35 miles of range. I know it's been tested at about 40 miles, and so that's iffy. I think it was like 39 or something, whatever it was. I have that data, and it aligns fairly reasonable. There's gonna be some error. There's gonna be that kind of thing. But once again, I'll tell you this: it may be about 5 miles off, which is not insignificant. However, if you look at what they're stating, I mean, I'm just being real. Maybe my model is not perfect, but it's better than 62 miles. I promise it's a lot closer to 35 than it is 62. So that's the point of this model. That's what this model does. I know that there's going to be a few miles difference here and there. And you may not get 40 miles. Someone was able to get 40 miles doesn't mean you're going to be able to get 40 miles. This depends on certain conditions as well. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But this does depend on certain conditions, and like I said, I'll break this down a little bit further in a minute. But let's say we want to go to get the $500 kit. So you pay $1,500 for the eMove Cruiser V2. Now you're not going to go buy a brand new eMove Cruiser V2 60 volt dual motor because you've already paid $1,500 for the single motor. But they have a kit you can upgrade for $500, which is the same price essentially as you would pay just for the new one. But you'll get that for $500, and then you'll upgrade your eMove Cruiser V2, and then you'll have a 52 volt dual motor eMove Cruiser V2. That's going to drop your range to about 33 miles. Jumping from a single to a dual. Once again, just a couple miles difference, right? Going from a 1 to a 2 in this particular setup. Now, if it's really closer to 40, then it's going to drop from 40 to 38 or something like that, right? So you're going to drop a little bit because all you're doing is just adding another motor. It's and that's going to bring this number down. Going to bring your range down. That alone. Now let's go to the 60 volt version and a dual. So if you buy the new one, if you buy the V2 dual motor for $2,000, your range is going to look more like 38, or it's going to increase relative to the dual motor about 5 miles more range. So if the other was right at 40, this one's going to be like 45, or going from a dual motor 52 to a dual motor 60, like look versus those. And so that's what you're looking at, about a 5 mile difference in range. They both have the same top speed, I think. The acceleration might be slightly different, but the biggest difference here, I think, is going to be the 5 miles of range that you gain going to a 60 volt as opposed to getting a 52 volt and upgrading it. And as these tests come out, because the 60 volt dual motor eMove Cruiser V2s have not been range tested yet, and so when they are range tested, we can come back and see how accurate my results are. I'm sure they're going to be a little light, and they're not light across the board. This is just particular with the eMove Cruisers for whatever reason. They're just a little light versus where we are. So Not a big deal. Like I said, there's going to be a few miles here and there that are going to be a margin for error, but still much more accurate than what they tell you on the site that you're going to get for range. For the a couple of things I was going to talk about, like maybe why, because as I was going through this and I was crunching away and I was thinking through some of the inputs, the variables that I was having to toss aside to make my model more accurate, I was questioning, okay, well, how can that be? How can you just completely toss weight out of the equation? Because I had weight built in until the model said, we don't really need it. So I only took it from there once the model said get rid of it, and I didn't make the decision like what I thought. I put everything in. I let the statistical model decide. And so, a couple of things I was thinking about: how can you take weight out of the equation if you have one scooter that's 100 pounds, one scooter that's 200 pounds, and you got the same battery wattage and amp hours? How can that be? And then I thought about it, and I thought, well, the battery is the heaviest part of the scooter, and so it's going to be very dependent upon the weight. So the bigger battery you have, the heavier the scooter is going to be. It's probably the most determining factor of the weight of the scooter. And so, based on all the inputs that I had, it just showed that it wasn't necessary to have weight and battery size. That battery size was enough to be able to determine range without knowing the weight of the scooter because of the significance that the battery has on weight. That's my take on that. And then, of course, the motor power. And so, like I said, I'll explain this a little bit as well. But the motor power, how do we know if they're 1,000 watts? How do we know if they're 2,000 watts? I mean, that's crazy. I mean, going from a 500 watt system, like this to a 1,000 watt system, you would think that the range would be much different, and it probably would be. But what I'll explain that this particular model measures is maximum performance, right? So this model says that it doesn't necessarily need to know the size of the motors in wattage, as long as you're maxing it out. If you're maxing it out, it says that it's not necessary to know that. All we need to know is the battery, and we can tell you how far this battery will get you. It's majority of the weight, and if you're maxing the scooter out, if you're maxing the speed and the performance out, this is what you're going to get. All of these tests, all the data that I have, this is done at maximum speed, at maximum performance. And so with the maximum performance of these scooters being taken out of the equation, we're able to get a more accurate picture. Now, as I explained with the Klima, I don't run it around at 40 miles an hour. I get a much better range than what they say I can get, than what this would tell me if I plug this in here. But what we're looking for is the best possible range that you can get out of these scooters with an average rider. And so you could say, when I got my Journey Max, I think the tested range was about 21 miles or 24 miles or something like that. Whatever, maybe 21. And when I tested it, I got about 18-ish before it really started trailing off. I don't know if it had got me another 3 miles going very slowly until the battery completely died, because I didn't run it that far. So I don't know for sure, because once I could tell the voltage drop and the acceleration drop seriously, I got my butt home. So that's the reason that I think that the motor watts weren't important in this particular estimation, in this particular prediction. And so I was able to come up with like I said, a lot of accurate results looking at just the battery size, because once again, it tells so much of the story about how far your scooter is going to be able to go. And I found that interesting. I wouldn't have known that before I started this yesterday and sort of got through this. And so once again, this is an average rider. I would say 100 165-ish pounds. And so the data is available online. All right, before I go, just going to talk about one thing. And I realized that, a lot of channels have, promotion codes, affiliate codes, way to support the channel, and so forth. My thought is that it's really difficult, if not impossible, to give an honest review or give all the information available. I'm not, whether it's honest or dishonest, we can have a discussion about that at another time that I'm not there. But it's what I'm saying is that it's more honest if you don't have a financial incentive tied to the review. And so if I have a financial interest tied to it, and I say click on my video, and there's something I just don't really like, but either I'm not consciously going to leave it out, or I'm just, my head is automatically sort of trained to sort of, look at the good, look at the, highlight the positives. And so because of that, I feel like it's just really difficult, if not impossible, in my opinion, to completely remove yourself from that. And so my point in trying to do this channel is to create a channel that's ran for the viewers, not a channel that's ran for the scooter companies. And so if the financial incentives are aligned with me telling you the truth, giving you my honest, unfiltered, unbiased opinion, then that's what I want. And that's what I'm trying to build. And some think that I may be on a fool's errand. And I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm saying I'm trying to find out for sure, or at least give it a shot. And so maybe I am, maybe it's too difficult, and maybe I'll have to pivot later. But that's what I want to do. And I'm going to give it at least a couple more months and continue doing the videos the way that I'm doing them, and see if I can get, drum up some support. And if in all my efforts I can't do that, then I will consider my options from that point, and maybe a pivot, who knows. But I want to make sure, I want to try to get you guys the best information available for you. I want this channel to be for you. However, I realize that by saying that, I'm asking you guys for monetary contributions. And although that's not something I'm necessarily trying to do, I'm trying to avoid getting monetary contributions from other places to best serve your interests. But once again, so I get the difference. If I tell you, hey, I got an affiliate link and you can save $100. Here's a link, and that link, you go click on it and you get $100 off, and I give you a review. Once again, my review's going to be biased at some point. You just can't completely remove that. You can try, you can, but it's subconscious. Just it'll go where you don't necessarily take it. And so that's just humans. That's just people and so forth. So I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm going to continue trying to raise funds for the channel to get scooters and so forth to review in the future by offering things like buy me a coffee, merch, and Patreon. If you guys are interested, please go there on my profile, and I'll also leave links in this description as well for this video. Now, I'm going to continue this, like I said, for at least a few more months, making these videos the way I've been making them, keeping it going. If I'm limited to making videos every time just because I have a scooter, I'm not going to make very many videos. And so I'm trying to keep a steady flow of videos, trying to keep a rapport going and so forth. But if that becomes where I feel like I'm not really getting anywhere, then we'll see. But for now, this is the direction I'm going in. And if you guys enjoy this, please consider supporting me if you find it helpful. Otherwise, guys, I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for your support and happy riding.